Welcome back to the Speak to Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Trucks. Today, we have Justin Jones-Fosu. His whole thing, man, it's about, a couple things. One, it's really about diving in and figuring out how to work meaningful, right? It's a really awesome concept because we all have work we do, but if it's meaningful work, you'll do it. If it's not meaningful, it's going to be tough. So it's about giving meaning to your work as opposed to finding meaning. But here's one thing we talk about is speakers. He dives into how he found his message, how it clarified itself, how he massaged it, how he navigated, that there's 3 P's that he actually covers that allow you to figure out how to become a great speaker. So I love the way he unpacks. He also talks about what's called a PhD speaker, not a bachelor's or a master's, but a PhD speaker. And it's really, really good insights for anybody who wants to grow their speaking skill set and or brand. So in today's episode, if you're a speaker, you're going to get some great takeaways of how to be able to be better in your business. But if you're a person that's just listening just because you like the podcast, you're going to find some great insights and nuggets on how to live a life right. It's kind of cool, man. He did a whole mixture. It was a great show. I'm not going to lie. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode with Justin. Welcome into the show. We're at Speak to Freedom podcast. We're here with Justin Jones-Fosu, and we're going to dive into this man's world, his heart, his life. And also, if you're a person that's a speaker in this world, we're going to hopefully give you some insights in terms of like how you can be better or get your name out there more and build a cool brand and do some fun stuff. So without further ado, welcome, Justin. How you doing, man?
I am loving this journey, man. Super grateful. I ran this morning, worked out, walked my dog, and kissed my wife. So it's a really good day.
I don't run. I do the workout thing. We got this whole gym in the house, and I do 4 days a week. Today's my day off, so I'm like, all right, I get to kind of. It's weird because on my day off, I'm like, should I take the day off? Like, yeah, body has to rest. As I get older, like the body has to rest. But the running thing, man, I'm not built to run, dude. I don't know. It's I got these big football legs, and so like running is bothersome. I'll walk, like I'll go out there and walk or sprint, but anything in between full speed and no speed, I'm not having it. Just me.
I understand, man. There's so many different things for people. I mean, I do Peloton. Some people do Peloton. Some people do stairs, right? So I love that there's a variety of different things, which speaks to the speaking industry, right? There's a variety of ways to approach it, and that's the beauty.
That's beauty, man. Everybody's their own thing differently. And this thing is, I realize I don't knock running. Like I'm not like, oh, your running's for crazy. I just go, I don't do that. That's completely okay.
And
I just work out for cardio. I just work out fast. Like there's no rest. No. You're like, it was minimal rest. I'm not doing CrossFit, but I just, I get it done, dude. That way I can rock and roll. And I can get my heart rate up. I'm like, oh, look, I'm at like 170 for the last whatever hour. It works. Let's dive into you though, man. I want to figure out if you were to find me walking in somewhere and someone tells me, oh, that guy's a speaker. And I go, oh, he's a speaker. Hey, Justin, man, what do you speak about? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, if I could back it up slightly, because I would, I would challenge that, because like the first and primary is I'm a husband. And so I want to be known as a husband. I want to be known as a dad. And I tell people, even though I speak about 50 to 60 times a year, that, those are my first 2 full-time jobs. And in speaking, I do quote unquote on the side, even though I've been doing it for 17 years. And so, so as a speaker, we really research, and I own a company called Work Meaningful. And our research centers on helping professionals and organizations to make work more meaningful. And what does that mean? It means that we move from transactional to transformational in the specific areas of the employee experience and inclusion. And so that's what we do. And so while I do speak, we operate more as a learning and development company. So we offer the full suite in terms of consulting, workshops, e-learning, all that kind of stuff. And I also speak. But I got a lot of my foundation before I moved into learning and development as a company, a lot of that into speaking.
I like it. And that's honestly where I think most people should be doing. When I look at the speaking business that a person has, it's not just speaking. It shouldn't be, in my opinion. I think speaking is a great vehicle to drive people to the thing you can do that really changes their life. Because while I can do something on a stage for an hour, it's the hours beyond that really create the impact that also create the change in somebody's life. So I love that you have that, because most people that are speakers aren't thinking that deep. And they go, oh, I don't want to coach. I go, you just don't have something you feel confident delivering after your speech. How did you get into the work you do, though? Like, was it a life adjustment? What was the situation that you landed on something about work meaningful being a thing that was meaningful to you?
Yeah, so it grew. Like I was the accidental speaker. I didn't come into this
Okay.
like I want to be a speaker, right?
Same. Yeah.
I started over 17 years ago, and I remember I just recently graduated. I was working as a store manager for this well-known French store named Target. And one of the
Yeah.
things while being at Target, for those that didn't get that, was I had opportunity to go and speak or lead a workshop in Norwalk, Connecticut, for the
Okay.
Golden Key Leadership Honor Society.
Hmm.
And I was living in Baltimore at the time, and so I drove up there my own dime, stayed with my boy in New York, and then drove over there. And after I got done, there were students there from different organizations, and they were lined up like, "Hey, like this is one of the best leadership workshops we've ever been to. Can you come to our
Yeah.
campus and our organization?"
Hmm.
I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And then this one lady who I wish I remember who she was, because I owe her so much. She was like, "Do you mind writing your prices in the back of your business card?" And I'm
Hmm.
like,
Prices.
"And prices? What do you mean prices? Like, like people get paid to do this?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And it brought me back to when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he asked the
Hmm.
question, "What would you do for free?" And I was like, "That's the wrong question." Because I remember thinking about that. What would you do for free? What would you do? And it was a wrong question for me because it was really, what am I already doing for free? There may be a
Yeah,
different
that's possible.
iteration
Yeah,
or manifestation of it,
yeah.
but I had been doing that for free in my fraternity, honor society as an upperclassman,
Yeah.
and that's the day that I started the business, March 24th, 2007. And so
Nice.
we've had different iterations of it. It started off, I think, as like JNS Solutions, and then JS Training Solutions, and then
Yeah.
then it became Justin Inspires for a long time, and then I wanted to go beyond myself.
Nice.
And beyond myself, I wanted to take it away from my name, and so we went to Work Meaningful
Okay.
to really develop for us as a company. And yeah, so that's
Let me go
that
back
for
to
me. I
something.
just started to ask the question, and my heart question is, what
Yeah.
am I passionate about? What do I have a degree of proficiency in?
Hmm.
Not degree in terms of formal degree. And then the last thing is like, what I want to help solve in the world. And I realized there's these two areas that were really deeply ingrained in me of how do we improve the employee experience. As a former HR professional, I want to say, how
Yeah.
do people show up better to work and bring meaning rather than trying to find
Mhm.
meaning? And last but not least is, how do we make inclusion just a part of who we are, not some
Oh,
extra
big
thing we
thing.
have to do, that it
Mhm.
applies to every single person, not just the big three of race, gender, and identity, but
Yeah.
that all of us are a part of inclusion. And how do we create spaces where people can show up in their full selves? And so that's where it came from.
I like it. You do get the most out of people when they do get to be themselves. Even if you don't like the people or like how they function or agree with their ways, I think somebody's act of existence doing something opposite isn't an act of attack on mine, So let
Yeah.
you do your thing, man. It's cool. Like I'm still living my life. As long as you're trying to like mess my thing up, we're good.
Yeah.
I want to dive deeper to that, but I do want to go back to a thing. So I get a lot of questions and conversations from people like, what should my, because I believe you have to have a core message for what you're doing. I love
Yes.
Work Meaningful. I was wise to go and make that adjustment because I have a brand called Dark Work, which is separate from Anthony. The reason is because if I, like you said, if I look at me down the road 10, 15 years, if it's just my name, I'm stuck in it. It's hard to
Yeah.
expand beyond me. So what
Yeah.
was the thing or who were the people, like what gave you the idea of going, I got to go beyond Justin Inspires? Like, where did that seed come
Yeah.
from? And how was that journey for you? Because I know a lot of people have that same thing of like, man, should I make it my name? Should I make it a different
Yeah.
name? I'd love to know your journey there.
Yeah. It comes back to one of the things that you mentioned earlier. And I want to speak to that around what people should be doing or could be doing. And I want
Yeah.
to say, like exercise, there's so many different realms of it, right? So even in my own mastermind group, where we have consultants and speakers, I have some
Hmm.
people who they don't want to do any of the extra stuff. They don't want to
Yeah.
do consulting. They don't want to do coaching. They want to go
Hmm.
speak and then leave and go to the next place. And I like, that's perfectly fine. Before I was like, oh, that's short sighted. But now I'm at that place where I'm like, if that's what you want to do, I have one of my friends who literally speaks 160 times a year. He and his wife just travel around the world. He's like, I don't want to do coaching. I want to do consulting. I don't want to do anything extra. I want to go speak and then transition. And that's what they do. That's their lifestyle. So I do want to say that there is a space for some people, but my journey is different. And part of my journey stemmed from when I was doing my MBA. And I was part of the entrepreneur incubator program when I was first starting the business. And I remember my board of advisors, they asked me a really powerful question. And they're like, there's no right or wrong answer. We
Hmm.
just want to have clarity to how we can help you. They said, Justin, do you want to be a speaker who has a business, or a business owner who is a speaker? And then they follow that up with, would you rather be, again, no right or wrong answer, Stephen Covey or Les Brown?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was business owner who speaks rather than a speaker who has a business, as well as Stephen Covey over Les Brown, right? Again, no right or wrong answer. It's just the aspects and what I wanted. And I realized as I was speaking all this time, I was like, wait a minute. I answered this question a long time ago, and I'm not leaning into it. I've been operating as a speaker who has a business, and I've been operating more in terms of the Les Brown. And so we shifted more. And by the way, I am nowhere near comparing myself to Les Brown. I just basically simply from a model perspective, right?
Personally, yes.
Great master of what he does, right?
Yes.
And so around 2014, I remember I joined the National Speakers Association, and I started seeing people who had the model that I wanted. People who were really diving into the research, because I'm a researcher, diving into the research and engaging in really great ways. And so like one of my buddies, Bruce Turkel, and then another guy, David, who does trust, and they were just really like, I was like, oh my gosh, like these are people who own businesses. They're doing trust indexes with companies and countries, and they're doing these pieces. And I was like, I need to start leveling up to that, because that's what I said I wanted, and that's what I want to do. Realistically, I think I only want to speak 12 to 20 times a year.
Yeah, same. 24, man.
That's it, right? Yeah. Like to your point, right? To the major major companies and/or conferences, but then allowing the intellectual property is a thing, the research, the practical research-based ways to help people and organizations, that be the driving factor. And so that's where it came from, that initial conversation with my board of advisors.
That's smart. I know that the beginning for most speakers, they believe they have to be the name, and you usually do. Your story leads it, your concept reads it. You kind of lead the message. I like that you've gone the journey to the point of going, okay, now I've got something in place that's for me. Now it's time to go beyond and expand. I also know that there's studies that show that when people are checking individuals' connection to brands and they like it or don't like it, our affinity to a brand is actually better when it's not a human being attached to the name. Like it's separate from like Tony Hawk, which is an interesting kind of nuance.
Right.
Brands that are individualized and like they're a person's name, they're not seen as likable as like a Louis Vuitton or a Gucci, which is still a person's name, but we don't know a person. And so I was like, dude, like that's big, because I don't want my work, and I think all of us, I don't want my work to be hindered in terms of getting into the person's heart that it's supposed to, because they don't like me.
Yes.
So I'm like, I got to find a way. So I love you kind of separate this. And I love you also going to the research portion of it. How do you start fleshing that out though? Because if someone's sitting here going, man, I want to start speaking, when should I be thinking about that? In the beginning, midway? I have my own perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So there's not one right answer. I'll share the answer I give, right? And this may fly in the face of some people. And again, I just wrote a book called I Respectfully Disagree. So I'm all for disagreement. Just respectfully. But what I would say to this is, I always tell people to start it from the beginning. One of the things I consistently say is that don't be a motivational speaker, be a content expert who motivates. And for me, that's a distinct difference. The perception, right? And again, we may call ourselves different things, but what the perception is. Perception of motivational speakers is rah, 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 you can do it, you can achieve, but then people leave with nothing, right? They don't have practical takeaways. They're really excited, but they don't have anything. We call it ignorance on fire.
No next day.
100%. Yeah. And so for us, I challenge myself and then others to be a content expert, right? Because that's the rise of TED and TEDx and all these things. They want content experts, not just people who can motivate. But I think you should still motivate even as a content expert. So here's what we decided, because I'm often asked this question. And I leaned into this first because of my journey and down the road of the PhD. Now, let me be very clear. I do not have my PhD. I planned on going PhD, got accepted to Syracuse, planned on doing a PhD in business, being an entrepreneurship professor, all that kind of stuff. And then felt God called me to a different way. And so so I went through the process, did the PhD project, I've been published in Academy of Management, all these kind of things. And I was like, why don't I take these same principles and apply it to speaking? And so what we did is we created this concept that I call the PhD speaker. And a PhD speaker doesn't, how to speak with expertise without getting a degree. And the whole essence of that is just three things, right? Number one is we call the three P's. Passion is, are you passionate about this area, right? Is there possibility to speak in this area? And then number three, which is the only thing we can actually grow in, is proficiency. Is where are you proficient in this area? And so one of the things as we talk about how do we grow in proficiency leads to that number two piece, which we call the speaker lit review. And in the speaker lit review, it's what I call the 10 by 10 by 10 model. In the 10 by 10 by 10 model, I do this for all speeches, books that I write, all this kind of stuff. It's simply this. Who are as you've crystallized your topic, your area, who are the top 10 people speaking about it? And not just speakers, could be experts on the academic side.
Yeah.
What are the top 10 books on this area? And then what are the top 10 peer-reviewed journal articles that speak and give research, primary data to this area? Now, why is this important? It's important because what I call it the PhD speakers, because at undergrad level, we're taught to memorize information. At master's level, we're taught to master said knowledge and information. But PhDs are created to create new knowledge and information. And we have a lot of undergrad and master speakers that they're either memorize other people's information and they're regurgitating in their own different way. They've mastered it, so they may even be considered some level of thought leader into that space. But then you have that PhD speaker who's created that new body of information. They're not the only one, because PhDs, you're just adding to the body of knowledge, but that's the way that we go about it. So if people are like, how do I dive into it? I say, right where you are, dive right in and you do the 10 by 10 by 10. If that's too much, do 5 by 5 by 5. But that's one way to dive in.
I love that idea, because in our program we do, I find that this is the distinction between me and most other, we'll call it speaker business coaches or speaker coaches. Some people focus on getting great on stage. I focus on getting great at getting on the stage. And that doesn't come with just like marketing. It's like, what are you marketing? And so, for example, we go all the way back. Our very first thing is we go, hey, what's your unique, I call it your $1 million message. What's the thing that in the topic area makes you shine and stand out different than anybody else? Think of, Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week. It's in productivity and delegation, but it's a unique message. And then from there, the very next thing is we do what's called a high fee framework, which is what you're talking to. So I go, what is the thing that, if that's a promise of your message, what are we doing that I can structurally guide somebody through step by step? Because if you do that on stage, you can then take it beyond the stage as a coach, into the company as a consultant. But if you're just talking, right, which it does lead to being what you're saying, that PhD, because a lot of it is you having to develop new information. And I unintentionally did this exact thing you're talking about. When I started going into identity and developed dark work, I was like, what is this thing? I was like, who else talks about this? I found like 2 other people. One guy is a speaker, great dude, by the way. And then I go, okay, well, what books have been written on this? The only books I could find like are textbooks, college textbooks on identity. I'm like, there's a big possibility, right? And then I go, well, can this tie to the rest of the world? And I go, yeah, a lot of people, it's all mindset. But at the end of the day, who you are is more important than what your mindset is. Because I don't think some of the best athletes and executives, if you ask them about the thing they did, they'd go, I did this. Why? Because what you had to do. They don't say my mindset told me to. No, it's just it's what I do. Like it's an embodiment. Like Kobe talks about, I made a contract with myself. I'm not negotiating it. That is an identity trait. That's who he is, right? We call it mindset as a way to describe what it is. But I go, identity is there, and so it created that next. And then I go, well, how do I make this process? So I created the concept, which is called a dark work experience, which took me going into all these journals and figuring out, where has anyone studied this? So
you're right.
you laid out what I did, and I was like, I never even thought I'd called it that, but it does make sense, because actively I'm creating new content, teaching, developing from things I've consumed and learned to add my piece of the pie in the puzzle of identity.
First of all, I love that you do that. And second of all, people need to engage you. I do no speaker coaching. I don't have any program. I don't do consulting and for speakers. So I love that you provide that aspect of it. I just offer this for free for just because people helped and served me. And so people listening to this are like, can I hire you? No, you can't hire me. Hire Anthony.
No, I get it. And the thing is, I'm not a fit for everybody. I'm well aware of that. But the truth is, I didn't do it intentionally. Like I was just doing my thing. I was like, I'm speaking, and people are like, how'd you do that? And I'm like, oh, I just kind of built this thing. And they're like, what does it look? And so I started finding out, which I recall, there's no like straight shot, clear idea of how, like if I want to open a hot dog stand, I go to get a
Yeah.
stand and I go to Costco and I heat them up and I said, but if you want to be a speaker, it's like a black
Right.
box of crazy. Like, how does that work?
It
And so I was
is.
like, dude, no one's teaching anybody. So I started unpacking the business portion of it. And it really became something where at first I was doing like online courses and then coaching. Like I had my business and I was
Yeah.
coaching, doing speaking, sorry. And then I started like, they're like, well, why don't you build a different kind of business? I'm like, what kind of business? Like, well, build one that you stand out in the crowd. And I go, well, I got this online course business. They go, yeah, everybody's got an online course business. Everyone teaches you to do that. They go, no one really does is gets on stage in front of thousands of people consistently.
Yeah.
So I asked my clients, I go, hey, how have all of you like found me? 90% it said, saw you on a stage. Son of a bee. All right, let's figure that out. Right.
Right.
So so I turned into this process, but I that was my journey to it. Now I do know that
Yeah.
this journey is there's ups and downs. There's obviously stumbling blocks and pitfalls. What are some of the things that you battled on the journey? I mean, 17 years, that's a haul, man. 7 years longer than I've been doing it, right? What has been some
Yeah.
of the bigger, I call it situations that created amazing lessons for you?
Yeah. I'll talk about two major ones because I think that they may relate. One is what I talked about, like the whole PhD speaker aspect. Like that didn't come about till about 2018.
Okay.
So I've been speaking for 11 years. And I decided to do one day, I was walking around a National Speakers Association conference, and I was talking to some of my friends and people who knew me or connected to me, maybe had seen me speak. And I asked them, what do I speak about?
Hmm.
And I got a hodgepodge of answers. And I realized that I had not leaned into something that I had learned many years ago, called the umbrella screw, and really kind of niching in and growing. And in the umbrella screw, some people call it the Facebook effect. But essentially, the umbrella screw is that you get it through the wall and it's really compact and small. You get it through the wall, and once it gets through the wall, you open it up.
Yep.
And now it has this thing that can hold so much more weight. And I realized what I was doing and what a lot of other speakers do is I opened it up before it got through the wall. And
Yeah.
so I've opened it up while it's kind of making imprints in the wall. You can't hang things that are really heavy.
Yep.
And I was not hanging things that were heavy. And so in that 2018 conversation, I started asking, what do I speak about? And then it really started me down this path of developing what is Justin? What do I
Hmm.
speak about? And that's where really Work Meaningful came from. This whole concept of Work Meaningful, because up to that point it was Justin Inspires.
Yeah.
And then the brand launched. And so that was number one. And it was just asking the question, what do I speak about? Now, let me be very clear. I was doing well, Anthony. This
Hmm.
is the time I'm speaking 70 times a year.
Yeah.
I'm on stages. I'm doing well financially. I'm doing all these things. But the lessons I learned from Apple and all the things from the iPod and iPhone is that when we're doing well is the perfect time to cannibalize ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I started asking people like, why are you doing? You're doing well and you're getting more. But I realized that it wasn't in alignment with my why. And I didn't want to, as a dad, I didn't want to be on the stage 70 times a year. And so I wanted to say, according to my values, what would make the most sense. That's number one. Number two, which had tremendous impact, and I think there some aspect of connection there, was in 2019. All this happened around the same time, which is very interesting. I was going to go to Ghana to confront my dad for not being in my
Mm.
life. So my
Okay.
dad was born and raised in Ghana, lives there
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
Um, and I was going to go and do it Will Smith style, right? I'm not talking
Mm.
about the Chris Rock version. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the Fresh Prince of Bel Air,
Sure. Yeah.
and where he was like, "Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you love me?" Right, that episode. But I had
Yeah.
a really good therapist, and I still do. So please get therapy, y'all. Please, please, please. I believe in therapy. I'll never stop going to therapy.
Hmm.
But really good therapist and a Leadership Charlotte cohort that challenged me from going to confront my dad and going to hear his story. And as I went to go hear my dad's story, I chose to forgive him. He didn't ask for it, but I
Hmm.
chose to, and I better understood why he made some of the decisions that he made. Now,
Hmm.
I still disagreed with the outcome, but in better understanding, it allowed me to lean to a place of forgiveness. Now, what I didn't understand, Anthony, was on the other side of forgiveness, I was holding back so many aspects of my heritage because he was the one who represented Ghana for me.
Hmm.
And when I forgave him, this overwhelming sense of my heritage just washed over me.
Yeah.
Almost like an out of body experience
Hmm.
of just embracing my Ghanaian heritage and roots, and led me to start taking people to Ghana once a year so that they can get exposed to what the media doesn't show us. It led me
Yeah.
to starting a foundation where 5% of every engagement and book sale and all that stuff goes towards educational initiatives. Right now, we're
Hmm.
building a school in Ghana,
Yeah.
in my dad's home village, right? And so it also led me to when I step on stage, if people like look me up, you'll see me with these custom blazers that I get
Hmm.
to wear and represent my Ghanaian heritage on my lapels and in my elbow patches. And it's just
Yeah.
another way for me to showcase that. So forgiveness was one aspect that really opened up the door to what makes Justin unique on stage
Yeah.
beyond even the content, but the full experience. And then number two was simply asking the question of what do I speak about and really leaning into and learning from others.
How'd you find the thing you speak about? Because I have ways that I've had, because a lot of people go, I want to speak, and they have like a good story, but
Yeah.
there's so many stories, right? Speakers, our issue isn't what to say, it's what not to say. There's just too many things in there, right? So the idea is
Yeah.
like, well, how did you hone into it? Right? Because some people go, I could talk about this and this and this and this and this. And I go, you got to find one. Not that you can't talk
Yes.
about those things, but you got to be known for one of them because that'll get you in there
Yes.
better. How
100%.
did you solidify that? Was it something that your heart gave to you? Was it questions from other people? Was it insights and conversations? How did you find yourself in that position?
Yeah, it was three things. And you don't need all three, but these three things happened for me.
Yeah.
Number one is I listened to people. As I listened to what people said I spoke about, I started writing it down, right? And I
Cool.
started doing some dotted lines like, yeah, oh no, I don't really want to focus on that. Oh, I really like that. Oh, that's really good.
Hmm.
And so in listening to people, and then as I mind mapped, and so after listening to people, I might start mind mapping of what really just gave me energy. As I thought about it and dove into it, what was something that really captured me? And then the
Hmm.
last thing is I talked to people who were coaches, right? And so I don't think I paid them, but you should pay Anthony. But like I just talked to friends who do that work who just were mirrors. And that's one of my superpowers, I believe, is
Yeah.
like I'm a mirror to people. I listen and I feed back to them what they tell me.
Yeah.
And people just kept coming, this concept of meaningful work just kept
Hmm.
coming up. And as I dove into some of the research, because before then it was just some preliminary research, one of the statements I would make in my presentations, my Your Why Matters Now, was that it's not about finding meaning in your work. It's about bringing meaning to your work, right? It's a ownership. You take ownership of that
Yeah.
process, that your
Yeah.
performance.
You get out what you give into
And,
something.
and yeah, and it just really resonated. And then I saw the research actually backed it up. And the research, the job crafting research 2001 by Rizanowski and Dutton that really dove into that. And so it took me first just choosing to ask the question because
Hmm.
we can sometimes as speakers and people who help other people, we can get really prideful and not ask for help.
Yeah. True.
And so asking for help. Number two, mind mapping. That works for me. That doesn't work for
Yeah.
everybody. Some people may put it in AI. Great. For me, it's mind
Yeah. It's
mapping.
different.
And then
Yeah.
number three was really kind of talking to people who are really good at coaching and really kind of bouncing it back to you.
Yeah.
And then as I aligned that with the research and realized I'd actually been talking about meaningful work without using those words,
Hmm.
that's how I came to that.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this podcast conversation with Justin Jones-Fosu. Here's one thing. We're talking about some great things right now. If you're looking to build a speaking business that is wrapped around a core message, that's your message. If you want to know how to build this thing from scratch or really how to dive in and develop something that's unique and new, I want to invite you to join me at the Speak to Freedom program. Now, if you go to speaktofreedom.com, you get some information about the process of the program. Here's a cool thing. We walk you through all of these things. There's literally 9 segments that build this entire business from scratch. So you can go through the journey that Justin talks about much faster, but also with me in your back pocket, we'll call it, guiding you through every single step of the way. So all you have to do is go to speaktofreedom.com. You'll get all the insights. So the business that you see Justin has running or myself that I have running, it's not just conversation and topic points. We actually, in fact, teach you how to do this. So if you're interested in that, go to speaktofreedom.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. I like it. And it's not an easy journey, man. I think some people want to just sit in a chair and go, what is it? And then, oh, that's it. And then get up and start walking.
Right.
I find that sometimes you got to start walking and then you stumble into it. Like, it's like, oh, that's what it was.
9
Like,
months.
yeah.
And it took me 9 months.
Yeah. It took
Right?
me
It
like
wasn't just an overnight.
5
I didn't
years.
go to one conference, right?
Yeah.
It was a 9-month journey of really crystallizing
Yeah.
what that message was for me. So
Yeah.
some
Smart.
people get it faster. It took me 9 months.
Yeah. Now, I think that it depends on, I think the process. If you got a good process, I wouldn't say our process can definitively guarantee you're going to find it within like a week, but we've got some interesting, because we have so many conversations and I've done this 300 times with different clients. I got to get a little process doing it. But I tell people this also. Sometimes the one we're going to find is going to get you about 80% there. Like
Yeah.
you're going to be like 80% in love with this. And then what has to
Yeah.
happen is I think you have to kind of massage it over time. And then you
Yeah.
either find out that this really is the one, or you're introduced to the one because you've earned it. Like
Yeah.
mine used to be identity shift. It was given to me as this kind of like conversation. And just like you're talking around a campfire, someone throws the idea. I'm like, shoot, that is a
Yeah.
kind of so I latched onto it, loved it. The research showed no one was doing it, talking about it. It was a need, right? So I kind of built this thing out. But over time, found identity shift isn't this sexy message. It's like, oh, what is that? Like,
Mm.
it takes a lot of explaining. And then I used to talk about this moment in time when I had a shift, which was I'd done all this work in the dark. It was to where I had this mentality of I've done too much work in the dark to lose in the light. And it was like this guttural
That's
ownership of
powerful.
like, it was who I was to succeed now because of what I did when you weren't watching. But I realized
Yeah.
that that's a language point that my team goes, what is this work in the dark you're talking about? I go, oh, dark work. They go, dark work. I go, yeah, dark work. They go, I like that. I go, me too. Let's do something with it, right? And so I started like
Yes.
testing it and showing it to the world. The world latched on so fast. It's the work you do in the
Yeah.
dark that allows you to shine in the light. And so
Yeah.
people got it. It resonates. And then all of a sudden, but I say this, had I not latched on at 80% connection to identity shift, I would never have got the skill sets or the gift of dark work. And
Yeah.
so you can massage and get it close, but you might, I mean, rarely do I have somebody go, holy crap, that's the one. Usually they go
Yes.
like, that feels really good. Let's build around
Right.
that. What do you do? And then people go,
Yeah.
well, what about if you change it? Well, I would say don't change it, but you can
Yeah.
refine it in a couple of years,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
You can tighten it up. Like dark work is still in the realm of identity. It's essentially
Yeah.
the vehicle that you take to get to an identity shift. So it's still there. But yeah,
Yep.
and then also I tell people who will find you and book you a year from now, they don't even know you exist right now.
Right.
So when they find you, they're going to find you based on whatever you tell them they should find you with. So
Right.
you'll be okay. You'll build it out. As you're
Yes.
looking at these, kind of looks at 17 years deep, I'm curious, like, what do you see in the next, and I don't want to say, what's your 5-year plan? What do you see in your heart's like eye for like the next 5 years with both you and
Mm.
with meaningful work or work meaningful, sorry?
Yeah. Wow. Several things. Number one, I won't be running it. Yeah.
I like it.
You know, there are people I've talked to my team of like, I'd love to have somebody else come and operate as the president and CEO of Work Meaningful. And
Mhm.
I can operate in my unique space of visionary founder. I love a lot of the work with EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System.
Yeah.
And I saw examples. And that's why we have to continue to have these conversations with people because you'll see examples when you don't see examples, you don't know what the possibilities at times. And so two things happened that provided me this example. One of my mentors, Dan Sullivan and Babs, a strategic coach, I remember sitting at the house and talking to them. And one of the things that really kind of resonated with me was like, Dan doesn't run the company, but most
Mhm.
people think he does, right? It's
Mhm.
like he's spending time in his what they call unique ability.
Yeah.
And his unique ability is in creating content and doing his things. And then I had another encounter where I'm at a conference with other people who are in the learning development space, and I'm sitting there talking to Ken Blanchard's wife, right? And we're at the philanthropy table, and I'm like, "Hey, did you and Ken start the company together?" She's like, "No." She's like, "But I took us from 6 million to 30 million over the course of 10 years."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Man, like." Because she's like, Ken doesn't like going to meetings, right? He doesn't want to be in the finance meetings. He falls asleep in those. Like those things bore him. He wants
Yeah.
to create content and be a cheerleader for the company. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's me.
I
Like,
get it.
I want to be able to draft culture and I want to create content. And so I'd love for somebody else to run the company, right?
Mhm.
Even as president and CEO, and me to operate in this space of visionary founder and content creator and all that that looks like. So that's number one. Number two, I'm applying for my doctoral program. So I plan on doing a DBA,
Mhm.
and but it's dissertation based rather than project based, and really doing some primary data around change management, habit formation, and
Nice.
meaningful work,
I
and
like it.
really diving into that content, working with organizations, helping to create what our work to a different beat deepening that message.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's really kind of like that 5 to 10 year
I like
time
it.
frame. And then some of the other work I have, really the big heartbeat behind this is the work we're doing with our foundation, right? And we're almost done finishing building one middle school.
Hmm.
But we want to be able to do more. And we're going to be doing a technology lab next. And so that's my really big, as a chairperson of the foundation,
Hmm.
like the work that we're doing around education and giving back. We're more focused on impact goals than income goals.
Yeah,
And we realize we need income to make impact,
I
but
get it.
our core center is impact. And
I
so
love it.
the big heartbeat of our mission is that we'd have built more schools. We would have impacted education, not only on the continent of Africa, but also the country United States.
Beautiful, man. There's a book by Lynn Twist called The Soul of Money. And
Oh, we
have
gotta
you
look that
read it
up.
before? It's a good
No,
one.
I have not.
It like breaks down like the concepts and money and how it came into play. And one of the good things I like about it is like people will make money, to buy things they don't need, But when you have a
Yeah,
purpose behind what you're doing, you make money and you don't feel bad about it because you're actually trying to give great value to create the
yeah.
income. There's a good book
It
there.
is. It is.
I
It's
love
now
that.
in my box. Thank you for
There
this.
you go.
Soul
Get it,
money.
get it. I read
Yeah.
that maybe like 10 years ago, man. It's a great book. And then I love the concepts you're talking about with the business. It's so with me and what I'm doing, I built the Speak to Freedom brand, Anthony Trucks, my personal brand. And then
Yeah.
I developed Dark Work. And it's funny, as I had a podcast just recently come out, someone goes, "What's your 10-year plan?" And I go, "To fade off into the background." They go, "What are you talking about? It's not a speaker's dream." And I go, "No, legitimately." And they go, "Why?" I go, "Well,
Yes.
I want to be able to let other people take the reins of it and go, but I'm going to lead it, right? I just don't want to be the guy clamoring to be on stage in 20 years because that's how I'm making
Yeah.
my living. But I also know that there is a space you're talking to. I'm like, so like for example, I will not do the coaching in our dark work coaching. Like I'll
Okay.
do some of the consulting, but I'm not
Right.
like I have a team of 12 coaches they're on board, ready
Yeah.
to rock and roll when we launch it all. And it's designed like that from the get-go because I realize that
Yeah.
if I'm the one that does it, like I'm going to be bogged down with things that will diminish the ability for the actual content, the concept, the reach of what the impact could be for the world to diminish. That's where I want to be. I love what it can
Yes.
do for your life, but me sitting in a one-on-one call, it doesn't make me as happy as it used to make me happy, the thought of it.
Correct.
But yes, it's hard to tell someone to do that when they think all these speakers, like I got to build a brand and be the brand and be the. I go, yeah. I mean, some of
Yeah.
them want to do that, but if you get to sit down with a lot of them, man, they want to be home. They
Yeah.
want to be home, man. Like, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying they don't want to speak. They love what they do. I love what I do. But the moment I'm done, I want to be in my house as fast as
Yeah.
humanly possible, bro. So
Yeah.
like I realize that and I go, all right. So if I can run this pace like this for the next 10 years, at some point I want to really be selective on any stage I choose to go on. Like I
Yeah.
might do 5 a year, but they're going to be the
Right.
biggest 5 stages I could
Right.
find, because my revenue and my impact is fulfilling me beyond. And then I'm also in a
Yeah.
sense of like I do a lot for at-risk foster youth. So like I want to make sure that as I'm creating the income, I'm creating time and energy. Like just yesterday, I don't tell many people these things, but I went to it's a middle school for a summer camp. I thought it was a camp of
Yeah.
like, 100 kids. There were 7 kids there. I was like, let's kill it, man. Let's have only
Wow.
7 kids. But they're like, they want to give me money. I'm like, I don't need any money. We got $100 for you.
Yeah.
Keep it, man. Give it to the kids. I do this at the level I do so I can actually give back. So I'm different
Yes.
pockets, but I feel kindred to your humanity and what you're doing, man. I appreciate you.
Yes.
Man, our time is coming to a
Can I,
close.
before you
Oh, fast.
transition, can I
Yeah,
say
yeah.
thank you? Thank you for choosing. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this, man. But thank you for choosing to lean into the impact, right? Because I've seen a lot of speakers, and many of them are transactional, bruh.
Yeah.
But hearing you not only hear, but hearing you hear, lets me know that you're transformational. And I love how you leaned into those 7 kids at camp. And I can just to work with you doing with at-risk foster students should be commended, man. And I just want
Thank
to
you.
encourage you to keep going, man. So thank
I
you
appreciate
for
it.
doing that work, bro.
That definitely will. I will. No one came back for me. So I was like, shoot, maybe I should do that for them. It helps if I can create
Yes.
more of me. Because statistics for us foster kids, they are not good statistics. So I'm like, dude, it's not that hard to go show up, a 20-minute drive from my house and talk to some people and
Yeah.
go home. And then my day goes on like normal. But for them, hopefully leaves a little seed.
Yeah.
Man, I've enjoyed talking to you genuinely. 2 things I want to ask. One is where can I send more people to get in touch with you, pay attention to your work, latch on where I go?
Yeah. 2 places. One is workmeaningful.com. And second is with the new book that came out, I Respectfully Disagree. Go to howtorespectfullydisagree.com.
Mhm.
It's pretty necessary in our society today, about how we engage with respectful disagreement. So those are the two places. And then if you're on social media, LinkedIn is the best place for me for these types of conversations. So Justin Jones-Fosu on LinkedIn.
I like it. I like it. Here's a question I like to ask the right people. Not that the wrong people aren't a good fit, but I always find that there's a certain person who answers this question well. It was asked of me one time when I was sitting at a Starbucks, and it caught me off guard. And I was like, dude, that's not a first conversation question, but it was a good one. Here was the question. What
Yeah.
promise did God make to the world when he created you?
Man, that's a deep question. As a person who's been to seminary, my mind went a lot of different places. But I would answer in this way. My mission, my goal, the promise that God made to the world when He created me is that we would value the humanity of every individual. And that's what I'm about. It's how do we leave people better in every interaction, no matter how much money they have or how much money they don't have. And like that for me is powerful. Why is it powerful? It's powerful for several reasons. One, you know who gave me money for my grades growing up? It
Hmm,
wasn't the CEO of a company. It
true.
wasn't the manager. It was the janitor at my mom's college at Grand Valley State
Hmm.
University.
Oh, wow.
He would get my report card and he would look at my grades and he gave me money.
Hmm.
And I'm after, right? And so a lot of the work that we do, we do this thing called meaningful moments, where we often do extravagant appreciation for people who aren't normally appreciated. And so number one is that we would value and see the humanity in every individual, no matter what they do, no matter what they look like or how they identify. Um, and yeah, that's the promise. That's why I
I
said number
like it.
two, but I don't have number two. I have one.
Oh,
And
that's all
that's the
right.
thing. It's the value of
One it is.
humanity. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good one, man. That we all, I think we're all in some ways the idea. If what I gather after asking that question so many times is a lot of it all anchors down to being an example, right?
Mm,
It's like everybody has a different way of saying it, but it's like I am wanting to do something great so people can see something great being done or feel something
mm,
great being done for to them. And I think that's everybody's, I think it might be God's promise overall, man. Like,
yeah.
do unto others kind of thing. Really
Yeah.
and it's been fun listening to that and synthesizing it down to like some, because there's been some amazing answers like yours. It's just one of those things where it's like, I'm always curious, but humanity wise, those who want to serve, like, it's like, gosh, I want to be a good example. I want to do good things. And it's like,
Yeah.
cool. If we keep that in mind, it's going to be good. So great answer. I
How
appreciate it,
did
man.
you answer that? I know your
Oh, it's
listeners have heard
changed.
this many times,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah, yeah.
curious to know how you ended up answering this question.
So I've found that in seasons I've answered it differently. I would believe the season I'm
Mm,
in now is I call season of dad. And
yeah.
I believe the promise God made to the world we made me is I was going to create from my lineage great human beings that are
Mm,
examples of how to do it right.
yeah.
And so like whether it's me or my kids, like I find that there's this thing of like legacy. And this is not always the most enjoyable thing to hear. I don't think people are going to remember me in 100 years.
Yeah.
I don't think people remember me. I think 10 years after I go, I'm going to be forgotten
Right.
by a
Yeah.
majority. And that's it's just life. There's so many
Yeah.
billions of humans that have lived. We know of a few of them, and half the time the stories behind them are made up. It's like
Yeah.
so I go, well, what's the true legacy? And I go, the true legacy is the people that I left behind. My
Yeah.
my daughter, my sons, their grandchildren, like my grandchildren, their kids, like that. That's who. So I go, well, if I can live in a way that they see as a right example, and then they
Yeah.
can then mimic that or have an example of how to do it themselves. I think that's my reason for being here, purpose. Like I think that's my promise. Now, in doing so, here's the cool thing: to be a great example to them of how to impact the world, how to live right in a sense of like do right by others. I do serve the world in process, but I
Yeah.
do. I love to speak. I love to share because part of that is going. I'm doing this cool things. My kids watch me do the cool things. So I'm
Yeah.
serving the world while I'm doing it as an example for my kids. So everybody wins in a sense. But I think the promise he made was like this guy's going to do it right, and then the people that come from him will also do it right. So that's what I'm battling to
Yeah.
do, man. Day in, day out. Like how do I We did Bible study last night at 11:45 at night because everybody finally got home at that time. We missed it on Sunday. I was like, we're doing it tonight. My wife she came downstairs so unhappy. She was like, I don't want to be here.
I'm coming.
She just, I was already in bed. Let me go to sleep. And yeah, she was. And everyone's like, well, Mom doesn't want to, but we got, it was good. It was a good time, a good conversation. But like, God, those are the little things, man, that if you don't do those, they don't grab and latch. And so I'm trying to serve the world in those moments, if it makes sense, because they'll go out to the world and impact them in some manner.
It makes so much sense. If I could share that with you, because one, I love your heart behind it. I think that's such a great heart, and it reminds me of and I love that you attached it to your season, because it reminds me of some people who can't have kids, right? Yeah. But they're still dads and they're still moms to others. In similar way that you went down the street and you were a dad in some aspects to those 7 campers. And so I remember, in a really quick story of I went to this great took my kids on this spring break, and at that time I was a single dad and was there, and beautiful lives. And I remember just tearing up because when I grew up, we didn't have that. We went camping, not because it was fun, but we couldn't afford to stay in hotels. I thought it was this is a cool experience, which I camp now, which is very interesting. Yeah. Thank you, Mom, for teaching me camping. But we didn't have money, right? We were on welfare, had some stints of being unhoused, all this kind of stuff. And I'm having this great moment, Anthony, of oh my gosh, my kids are in this beautiful cabin overlooking the mountains and all this kind of stuff. And then this overwhelming sense of, I don't have the right words for it. Problem or thought came into my mind. It's Justin, it just can't be about your kids. Mm-hmm. And those are probably some of the catalyst moments for the work we're doing today. Mm-hmm. Right? Of just yes, my kids, because I'm in, spend a lot more time with them than I will anybody else's kids, right? I'm not gonna be that person that's out there in the world and then my kids get a little of me. No, I'm gonna be there for my kids.
I get
it.
But
I love that you and I and others have leaned into, it can't just be about our kids. And that while the time may be different, our heart and passion to impact them is the same. And so I appreciate you for that, brother.
You too, man. It's needed. We got to be more guys got to do it too. And women, it's just, and they are. I think they are. I think they're just thought of we need more. I think we need more people to open up to them, to receive them. Because there's great hearts and minds that want to serve, but people go this guy just spewing stuff. It's nah, man, just pause, take the malice out and listen. You'd be surprised what I can do to help you. So it's a journey, man. But hey, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Genuinely, if you guys are here right now, thank you so much for still hanging with us. If you want to know more about what this man's doing, go to the places he sent you. You'll see in our show notes. Take a look at his work. Engage in some manner. You'd never, ever know what could be beneficial to you. If you heard one thing in this podcast that resonated with you, take action on it. The thing you act on, even if it's one single thing, it creates momentum in a direction where that motion changes your emotion. So get into motion. Thirdly, if you know someone who needs to hear these words because you've been trying to give them to this person, you love this person, but you're too close to serve them, and you know Justin's words can, just share the episode with them, hit a link, or put it in your social feed. You never know where that little thing can go to expand and touch lives. Outside of that, thank you again. Go into the world, and if you're a speaker, speak to freedom. If you're just a listener, find someone who can speak hard into you so we can create freedom for your life. That's it. Anthony Truxt and Justin Jones-Fosu signing off. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Speak to Freedom podcast. I hope you found our discussion inspiring and informative. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated on all our future releases, be sure to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for tuning in today. Until next time, remember to speak with confidence and clarity so you can one day soon speak to freedom. See you on the next episode.